position to be able to be the primary person to carry out the protection of consumer legislation that's been passed. And I can tell you that I would aggressively, in a measured way, but aggressively enforce the consumer protection laws. Whether we're talking predatory lending, whether we're talking the Retail Sales Installment Act, whether we're talking the Consumer Sales Protection Act, it doesn't make a difference. I will aggressively enforce it in a responsible way. I will tell you, however, that I am not going to create novel theories to be able to go after businesses and things like that. I think we have enough laws on the books, and I think that's going to keep us very busy in just enforcing the letter of the law in the consumer protection area. I'm troubled by the fact that, Mark Dan fashioned him somewhat of an Elliot Spitzer type, and while the term Elliot Spitzer has not been used during my campaign with Rich, it's become very apparent that he feels very strongly in an expansive interpretation of how we enforce the consumer protection laws. You'll recall that a couple years ago, there was litigation brought against lead paint manufacturers in Rhode Island. The question was brought, first of all, it was brought under the theory of public nuisance, and there was a determination made in trial courts in Rhode Island that yes, under this public nuisance theory, manufacturers from 20, 30, and 40 years ago could be held liable for abatement costs associated with abating public projects. That went up to, and as soon as that case came down, it spawned litigation, of course, in New York, where Elliot Spitzer was at the time. And Mark Dan and his tenure went ahead and filed a series of lawsuits, as did a number of municipalities, not just one. Ultimately, the Rhode Island Supreme Court said, this whole public nuisance theory is flawed, and dismissed the lawsuits. Looked at by New Jersey, they dismissed the lawsuits, and there were other jurisdictions that did that as well. So one by one, those lawsuits were dismissed. Those lawsuits remain pending here in Ohio. They were not dismissed by Mark Dan. And I think Nancy Rogers kind of just holding off until the Attorney General's office. That's not the kind of litigation that I tend to run. So, to me, that's beyond the pale. That's beyond the issue of enforcing the consumer protection laws that are on the book. Okay, and Mark Dan went after charter schools under this novel theory of breach of the charitable trust authority. I immediately, thought that was a frivolous lawsuit. Suggested it was a frivolous lawsuit. When we got in the race, and you'll know that a week ago that Judge Michael Tucker in Montgomery County dismissed the charter lawsuit, saying that flawed legal theory was being pursued by the Attorney General's office. I bring those cases up to you because I will not file frivolous lawsuits. I feel that, believe it or not, the Attorney General does have a role to play in the promotion of a positive business climate in the state. When you think of who promotes the business climate in the state, you generally think of the governor, you think of the General Assembly, and that's where the lion's share is. They're the ones that drive the policies, how we're going to regulate, how we're going to tax, and things of that nature. But I do truly believe that the way the Attorney General comports himself with the enforcement of the laws in the state of Ohio can go a long way towards either creating a positive or a negative environment for businesses in the state of Ohio. I've been practicing law for 30 years. I represent individuals. I represent small businesses. I've represented fairly significant Fortune 500 companies in litigation as well. And I'll tell you the one thing that's in common is that when an individual, a small business, or a large business are involved in litigation, not only do dollars roll out the business, but it's always in the back of their mind. They can never be completely focused on what's going on, how they can grow their business, because in the back of their mind they're thinking about 3 or 4 pieces of litigation that they're having to deal with. Do I have to have my deposition taken next week? When's the next trial? That kind of thing. So, I think that under Mark Dan, unfortunately, and let me just say, I intend to hold businesses to the same standard as I would hold an individual. If you cannot and will not come into compliance with the laws of the state of Ohio, the regulations, then I will litigate. But I think that's an absolute last step that you take. I don't think it's a weapon, a club that you hold over businesses' head in this state. And I don't believe that we need to regulate by litigation. To be a small business in the state of Ohio is not to be an enemy of the state. And the first time they find out that they're not in compliance, with a law or with a regulation shouldn't be at a press conference being conducted by the Attorney General where he announces the return of a significant indictment against that business or the filing of a significant lawsuit in the United States District Court or Common Pleas Court. The lines of communication need to be opened up. There needs to be cooperation. There needs to be coordination. There needs to be education, training. My experience in business has been that the overwhelming majority of businesses, just like individuals, want to be compliant. And I think that the Attorney General needs to take every step short of litigation, if at all possible, to make sure that that happens. And if it doesn't, just like we have recalcitrant individuals, we have recalcitrant businesses, then you pull the trigger and you file litigation. But we need to be doing some things to make sure that we improve upon that, 46th or 47th rating we have in terms of job creation in the state of Ohio. And I really do believe that the way litigation is handled by the Attorney General does have an effect upon whether a small business stays in Ohio, or whether they expand their business, or whether or not other businesses from outside the state want to come into the state. So I just want you to understand that I will vigorously, in fact, enforce the consumer protection laws, but I want you to understand that just because there's a business on the other side doesn't mean that I'm going to take a whack out of them, okay? We're going to see what we can do to bring them into compliance short of litigation.